Today is Friday, September 13th, 2024. My name is John Raymond Irving, and I'm in Blacksburg, Virginia at the Newman Library. Joining me today for an oral history interview is Steve Skolochenko. This interview is part of an oral history project with Virginia Tech alumni who served in the Vietnam War. Before we get started, Steve, do I have your permission to record this interview?
Yes.
Excellent. So, Steve, just to give you an idea of what this layout is going to look like, I'm going to ask you a couple of basic information questions about your service, and then I'm going to take you back and walk you through your biography and try and cover the events of your life somewhat chronologically without skipping around too much. So just to begin, I want to remind you that if you experience any difficulty during the interview, we can take a break or we can stop at any time, and you do not have to answer any questions that you do not wish to. With that in mind, Steve, do you also have any access or at least the knowledge of where to get access to counseling services should you need them?
Yes. The
Excellent.
Maryland
Glad to hear it.
DVA is very active.
So, Steve, how long were you in the military?
A total of 28 years.
And were those all active duty?
No, I had 15 active duty. The remainder were Army Reserve.
Understood. What was your occupation?
In the military?
Yes, sir.
Started off in logistics, as maintenance, and then progressed to systems analyst, computers, IT in those days. This was back in the early 70s.
And is that where you stayed for the rest of the time?
No, when I left active duty, I went back into the broader field of logistics.
Understood. Or what years were it that you were in the service?
Active duty, 65 to 1980. Reserve, 1980 to 1992, I believe.
Neat. And which of those years were you in Vietnam?
I was in Vietnam from roughly March 66 through July 67.
Understood. Previous to going over to Vietnam, were you in the military?
Well, I entered active duty in October of 65. So the answer is yes, but that was schooling.
Understood. I'm going to come back to your time in the military, but I'd like to start a little bit back in your past. So when were you born and where was that?
I was born in the District of Columbia, and that birthday was August 11, 1942. Yeah, old.
How did you like growing up in D.C.?
Loved it.
What did you like to do there?
Well, let's make a distinction. I lived in Washington, D.C. until I was about 13 or 14, when the family moved outside of Washington to a suburb called Oxon Hill, O-X-O-N, as opposed to Oxon. It's short for Oxford on the Hill. And anyway, I got into hunting, fishing, and getting in trouble with my chemistry set.
Was the hunting and fishing, I'm assuming, not something that was quite as available in D.C.?
No, you really couldn't. In the neighborhoods we were in, it was houses, apartments. Oh, cool.
So you said you moved when you were about 13. Was there, what prompted that?
My father wanted me to get closer to where he worked.
Gotcha. And what did he do for a living?
Well, a number of things. Briefly, he started off in Brooklyn, New York. After he got out of high school, he was a painter and interior decorator. Then he got a job at the cartridge case shop at the Washington Navy Yard. From there, around 1943, he went from the Washington Navy Yard as a machinist to the Naval Research Laboratories, where he retired in 1967 as a production control supervisor.
Oh. So did he ever serve in the military?
No, he was disqualified from the draft in World War II because he had had an ear infection as a child and his eardrums had been pierced.
Oh, that's unfortunate. Well, I'm glad to hear that he didn't have to deal with the hardships of war, though. What about your mom? What did she do?
Mom worked in a department store called Jellif's in Washington, D.C. after they moved to Washington. She came down to Washington around 32, I think. And she did that until I think I was born, in which she stayed home and was a mom. And then around 1952 or 53, she went to work for the largest liquor distributor in Washington and Baltimore, doing artwork for salesmen's books.
That's interesting.
The firm was Milton S. Kronheim.
And so your mother was an artist?
Not that I really knew, but she that's what she did.
Yeah.
For Kronheim. She also had a lead foot.
Yeah. Did you have any siblings growing up?
Yes.
How old were they?
16 months younger than me. My brother also served in the Army.
What was your relationship like with him growing up?
Tight. We're still tight.
Yeah.
Except when I go down to visit him and we go to the gym and he's, oh, what are you lifting now? What can you bench press?
Do you still work out?
Yes.
That's impressive. I'm genuinely, congratulations.
It gets a lot of attention.
Yeah.
People often ask me how old I am. I say 82. And they say, holy cow, you're 82.
You look like you're in fantastic shape. I don't blame them for being surprised.
Relatively speaking, I am. My brother also works out. He's a retired family practice physician.
Did your brother serve in the military at all either?
Yes. In fact, at one time in the Army, we had 3 Captain Skolochenkos. My brother, his wife, who was a nurse, and myself.
Wow. So, and sorry to back up a little. When you exited the military, what was your highest rank?
I left the Army as a major.
As a major. Okay. Now, sorry to skip around, but to go back towards your childhood some. Where did you go to high school?
I went to Oxon Hill High School.
Did you have any favorite subjects or activities?
Yes.
Which ones were those?
I liked chemistry, physics.
You mentioned getting into some trouble with your chemistry set. Was there anything notable that you did that you can remember?
Oh, yeah.
Do you want to tell me about that?
Growing up in Congress Heights before we moved, I had a buddy born in January of 43. His name was Jerry Foster. Jerry's parents babysat me, and we stayed in touch. And then he moved out to the Oxon Hill area, as did I, and we had got in trouble with our chemistry sets before we moved, and we got in more trouble afterward. We shot rockets before nitroguanidine pellets. We used zinc dust and sulfur, set some fields on fire in the woods. We blew up a lot of things. We used real high explosive, trinitrophenol, picric acid. And we got in trouble with that.
The teenage American dream, I hear.
Well, I'll tell you, if we were doing it nowadays, we'd be in jail. Now, Jerry, we lost touch a little bit when I went to Vietnam and he went to graduate school. I think it was Ole Miss. Anyway, ultimately got his doctorate in chemistry and wound up teaching college. And we stayed in touch through mutual friends. And then about 97, 98, I was in San Antonio on business. His parents were still alive, and they lived up outside of Amarillo in Panhandle of Texas. I called him and said, I'm coming up. So I did, and we hooked up again. I was able to see his parents before they passed, and it was a fantastic feeling. It was like no time had passed between us.
That's incredible.
Well, the happy part of it is I told him, look, you guys got to come up to D.C. So his wife had business in D.C. They came up, stayed with us. And unfortunately, his wife and my wife hit it off like sisters. So every time we see them talking, we know they're conniving and colluding against us. And we said, hey, you're going to retire. We're going to retire. You like to travel. We like to travel. Let's do a trip, see how we get along. If we don't, we're still friends. We can visit. If we do, we can do more trips. So since that time, we've probably done 20 trips together.
Oh, wow. So I guess it worked out is what I'm hearing.
Yeah. We just talked to them last night.
Oh, I'm glad to hear it.
Now they're in the Panhandle of Texas, about 30 miles northeast of Amarillo. They live in a town called Fritch. Fritch has a stoplight. They're very proud of their stoplight.
Just a singular one?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, let's put it this way. They have 4 acres fenced with 2 barns, and they live downtown. It's rural.
Yeah, sounds like it. So when did you meet him again, you said?
I guess it's around 97 or 98. That's 1997, 98.
I'm sorry, I was referring to when you originally met him. Like, you said you grew up with him.
Well, we were toddlers together.
Oh, okay.
I can send you a picture of us in 1945 in little shorts and bib things. And in fact, I found that picture. I'm bending your ear now, but this is cute.
No, I'm happy to hear it.
I had it colorized and printed on 2 T-shirts. And it said BFF since 1945. The 2 of us standing together. We went on a cruise out of Galveston in March, and we wore the T-shirts at the same time. And people just stopped us to start looking at the shirt, and then they could see them start counting. 1945, 55, 65, 75. You guys have known each other 80 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
That's an impressively long friendship.
Yeah.
So
I'll send a copy of the picture to you.
Yeah, I'd love to see it.
Yeah, it's cute.
So we were talking about your experience in high school. Did you always know that you wanted to go to college?
Pretty much. My parents did. Neither of them were college graduates. My aunt, who was a whack, joined the Army, I think in 43 or 44 out of high school. Told my parents that I really should go to a military college. I needed guidance. So I went to Virginia Tech and was in the Corps of Cadets.
Was Virginia Tech always your kind of leading choice?
No. My first choice, I think it was... I think it might have been Rice University. They were good in physics. I wanted to study physics.
Yeah. Is that what you studied when you came to Virginia Tech?
I started off in physics, yes.
You said you started off there. Did you end up switching that at some point, though?
Yes. Be quite honest with you, I could not handle partial differentials and other things like that. And I switched to chemistry, and that's when I stayed. Good old Davidson Hall.
Yeah. And what years were it that you were at Virginia Tech?
60, and I graduated in 65.
Gotcha. class of 64, though?
Yes.
Understood. So I assume that this was further enough back in time that your joining the Corps of Cadets wasn't an optional thing back then?
No.
No?
If you went to a land-grant college, you had to do 2 years of ROTC, unless you were 4F for the draft or had prior service. That changed, I think, in 1963.
So that would be the year before you graduated, correct?
Yes.
So you had the opportunity then, I suppose, to not finish out the 4 years in ROTC?
Well, I was offered what they called a contract to go to senior ROTC and be commissioned in the reserve upon graduation. Now, if you signed a contract, you got $25 a month.
Well, that's a nice little bonus there.
Well, it was you could buy a lot of gas.
Yeah.
At 22 cents a gallon. So it was good money then.
Yeah. And you chose to go into the Army, correct?
Correct.
Was there anything that guided that decision?
Not that I recall. You had your choice then of either Air Force or RA or TC. And I just stayed with the Army. Oh, I guess one of the things, I couldn't fly because my eyes.
What was wrong with your eyes?
Nearsighted.
Gotcha. Was that something that you had been interested in doing prior?
No.
No. Just had the opportunity taken away?
Yeah, that was pretty much it.
Understand. So, do you keep up with any of the people you met at Virginia Tech?
Yes. Remotely. We got together a good bunch for the 50-year reunion. I exchanged Christmas cards with a couple of them. And, but a number of the, what we call our rat buddies have passed.
Yeah. Sorry to hear about your loss. Do you have any memorable experiences at Tech?
Well, they would have is they still have Squires Hall?
Yes, sir.
All right. Virginia Tech at that time was about 4,800 men and 200 women. At that time, if you were a woman, you wanted to go to college, you went to Radford, unless you wanted to study nuclear engineering, nuclear physics, aerospace engineering, or animal husbandry. So the term we used was chasing skirts. So you had to go drive to Radford or down to Hollins College in Roanoke, which was a girls' school.
Still is,
Sullins College. Okay. Sullins, down I think by Bristol, which was girls. Virginia Innermont, and hold on one second. And Longwood.
Yeah. We can pause for a second if you need to.
Yeah, no, that's all right. Anyway, so that's what we did. And then girls' schools would send busloads up for a big dance, I think in the October time frame. And it was like a big mixer.
We have the military ball now still. Was that what that was?
No.
No, okay.
No, you didn't have dates per se. You just met girls and then pursued one or more, whatever your choice was. But the interesting thing was we get together and we call a pig pot. And a senior would take the money. Everybody kicked in a buck. And the senior would decide who danced with the ugliest girl. And they won the pig pot.
Well, that's brutal.
Little did we know at the time that the women had the same thing going.
Oh,
So that was sort of an interesting memory. Then one of the other things that I and another guy by the name of Charlie Barnes hold, as far as I know, we were the only cadets court-martialed by the honor court at Virginia Tech.
what was that for?
It was not an honor violation, but we pulled a prank, got a little out of control, but we didn't break any rules per se, and they didn't know what to do with us. Charlie was a chemical engineer and I was a chemistry major, and we were doing research work in the laboratories down in Davidson. And we had a senior buddy who was a real ass. He would report his senior buddies and all that stuff. So we took a syringe and a couple cc's of a chemical compound called, if I remember correctly, now I'm trying to remember this, isobutyric acid, essence of skunk or something. And we knew where his room was, and we inserted the syringe through the screen and just squirted this out in his room. Right. Well, it permeated all of the dormitory. What was it? Major Williams Hall, I think.
Yes, sir.
Opposite Shanks. So at midnight, everybody was out. They were tennis courts in the center in those days. And they had to bring in stink bombs, you know. So they didn't know what to do with us. And they decided to court-martial us.
What was the result?
The result was we got put on strict military probation for, I guess, from April through May, something like that. I think we were the only ones ever court-martialed.
That's a really, really interesting story. Something to distinguish yourself there. I loved it.
Yeah, I like being extinguished. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. Did you have you gotten the opportunity to come back to Tech at all?
Yes, for a 50-year reunion.
Nice.
Yep.
How'd you enjoy that?
That was fun. I did enjoy it. We had a good time. Good to see the guys again. And unfortunately, some of them have passed since then.
Did you get a chance to?
Have
I'm sorry. Proceed.
Go ahead.
I was just wondering if you noticed any big differences with the college since you've left.
My Lord, yes. They were built when we left. What's his name? The man who came from Kentucky and became president succeeded Newman. Started a building campaign expanding Virginia Tech. And they were building Vaughter Hall and all of the other dorms going up the hill. The expansion was, just huge. Yeah, and it was going. T. Marshall Hahn, Dr. Hahn.
Gotcha. Yeah, we now have buildings named after him too. So time has been going.
Yeah, I hope he's still alive. I don't know if he's still alive or not, because he was young.
I could not tell you the same. He's certainly not the president anymore, though.
No.
So during your time at Virginia Tech, would have been when JFK was assassinated. Do you remember that day?
Yes.
Do you remember where you were when you heard about that?
I was in the dorm listening to Virginia Tech radio, and they announced it. Then we had a formation on the drill field, salutes, and Then I went down to Roanoke for a date because it was just before Thanksgiving.
Well, that's a festive way to, find out that the commander-in-chief was assassinated.
Well, we didn't have internets in those days,
Yeah.
or cell phones.
Was there anything that the school did? I know you mentioned the drill field marching, but was there something else done for remembrance or just to kind of acknowledge that?
I think that was it. That's
Yeah.
all I remember anyway.
What was that general attitude among the Corps like to, be serving in the military and find out that the president was assassinated?
Well, nobody could really believe it. That stuff didn't happen, since McKinley, I guess. So there was generally disbelief, and then a certain degree of sadness and resigning yourself to the fact that it's taken place, and you got to go on with life.
Yeah. In a similar vein, you said that you grew up in D.C. I imagine you would have been over in Vietnam for this, but do you recall hearing about the D.C. riots in the wake of Dr. King's death?
Yes. I was back from Vietnam and stationed at Aberdeen Proving Ground at that time. Yeah.
What was that like to hear about?
Well, Dr. King, in my opinion, I found him to be very well-meaning and trying to do good things. So I was upset that he had been killed, and went down to D.C. and got turned away because of the riots going on, and they brought the Army up from the 82nd Airborne at Bragg to help control the riots. And
Did you get to witness any of that chaos from the riots?
No, I steered clear of it.
I'm glad to hear that you weren't involved in a negative way. Certainly, were you still close enough then to be kind of affected by that? Were you in the D.C. area?
No, we were too far away.
Okay, I'm glad. So, if I can now skip forward a little bit in your time, when did you deploy to Vietnam again?
March of '66.
And do you remember when it is that it dawned on you that you would be going to Vietnam?
That would have been around December of '65 when we got our assignments.
Did you have any idea that you might be going to Vietnam before then, just after having heard about the war? Or was it really not until you got your assignment that became a reality?
Well, we sort of knew a good number of us in our class would wind up going to Vietnam. I mean, we would watch the news and the BOQs when they had the television sets in the rec room, for lack of a better term. Yeah.
Yeah. What was it like to hear about the news of Vietnam in the beginning of the war?
Well, it was just interesting. We knew it was going on, didn't know enough about it or the politics or anything. Although at Virginia Tech, one of the ROTC instructors had been a member of, I believe it was the White Star Mobile Ching team, Captain Frank F. Van Dusen was his name. And I was very familiar with him because he was coach of the rifle team and I was on the rifle team at Virginia Tech. Van Dusen was a West Point graduate, a sharp officer, and he had been, I guess in 62, 61 time frame, had been to Southeast Asia. Unfortunately, later on, he was killed in action as a battalion commander in Vietnam.
I'm sorry to hear about that.
Yeah, we were too.
So did he give you some kind of insight into what that was going to be like as a...
Not really. He mentioned that he had been there and he had worked with the Vietnamese people and the Vietnamese army, but not much detail beyond that.
Yeah. And in a similar vein, all the training that you did, between the Corps of Cadets and before you deployed, how well do you think that prepared you to go to Vietnam?
I was pretty well prepared, I think, for what my mission was, which was in logistics. If they just said, you're going to go to Vietnam and you're going to take out patrols at night and that type of thing, yes, I had training in that, but not extensive at all.
What type of training did you go through to feel prepared to do logistics?
The Ordnance Officers Basic Course at Aberdeen Proving Ground and the Ordnance Maintenance Officers Course at Aberdeen Proving Ground.
And before I get too far into your actual service, I wanted to ask, did you volunteer or were you drafted into the Army?
Well, I volunteered by accepting the commission.
Gotcha. Yeah. Was that influenced by the fact that the draft was ongoing?
No.
Understood. Did you just have a desire to serve regardless?
Yes.
Understood. It's very noble. Did you know anybody else who was drafted?
People who were drafted. Before I went to Vietnam, you mean?
Yes, sir.
I don't recall any that I knew at the time. I learned later, upon returning, that some high school classmates and had been drafted, but not prior to Vietnam. No.
Understood. So to get into your combat some, do you, or your service, I should say, do you remember your first day in Vietnam?
Yes.
What was that like?
Well, we landed at Tan Son Nhut Air Base, and we were picked up and bussed over to some barracks where we stayed until we were picked up by representatives of the 173rd Airborne, which is the unit we were assigned to. Now, interestingly enough, the night we were there, Tan Son Nhut got hit by a mortar attack.
That's a nice way to welcome you to Vietnam.
Yeah, that way, yeah. That was sort of weird. Fortunately, our building wasn't hit. And I think some others were. There were some wounded, but we were lucky.
I'm glad to hear it. How jarring was that to have that as your first experience?
I don't recall it being jarring. I just, okay, we're here. That's it.
Was that expected almost, or is that what you heard about Vietnam and you were ready for it?
No, not after getting off the plane and just getting a meal and then go bunk to bed.
Just resigned to it. So What was an average day like for you? What were your responsibilities?
In Vietnam,
Yes, sir.
I was the maintenance platoon leader for Company D Maintenance, 173rd Support Battalion. And when the infantry units, artillery units, and armor, etc., went on an op out to the field, out to the jungle, an operational area, I took the maintenance platoon out with them. So we would convoy out, and I always had what was called the trail party of the convoy. I had maintenance trucks, I had a wrecker, and I was always assigned a couple armored personnel carriers from D Company, 16th Armor, which was organic to the 173rd. And we were at the end of everything. So if a vehicle hit a mine or broke down, we had to secure the area, recover the vehicle, and then proceed. So after a couple of these incidents, we were an hour or two behind the main body of the convoy and out on our own. And that's why I had a couple armored personnel carriers under my command.
Yeah. Did you experience combat?
Yes.
What was the most significant threats or concerns to you in the field?
Mines. Road mines.
Were there a lot of those?
Yes. Yes, there were.
How do you deal with those?
Well, we were trail party. So if there were any mines in the road, usually other people ran over them, set them off, and then we'd have to go recover the vehicle and treat wounded as best we could.
Yeah. Is there any specific mission that you can recall that you could walk me through?
Hang on 1 second. 1 second.
Absolutely.
This is what's called a swagger stick. Officers and NCOs in the really old days used to carry them, and they'd use them to point things out. But when I left, my men gave me this one. I don't know if you can see the engraving on it.
I can't read it, but I can see that there's something there.
Yeah. But the reason I picked it up, it also has on the back all of the ops that we participated in. So I'm looking at War Zone D. That would be Operation Hue City. Well, and we were out recovering vehicles that hit a mine, and the vehicle I was on ran over a mine. And I had just finished telling the driver to stay off the shoulder of the road. They're mined. And he hit a mine. And I got blown up off the vehicle. Now, it was a big track vehicle. And over into the woods, jungle. And got up and shook myself off. And one of my men came over and said, "Lieutenant, are you all right?" I said, "Yeah." "Well, you don't look all right." "Now, why is that?" "Well, you got blood coming out of your ears." Yeah, it broke my eardrums. But other than that, all the parts are still there. Good.
I'm glad that was, the extent of the injuries from that. but I'm sorry to hear that regardless. Can I just, to get an idea of what you're saying, you said you got blown off the truck. So where were you situated on the vehicle?
The vehicle was an M88 medium armored recovery vehicle. There's a cupola above the left front of the vehicle in which the driver stayed. I was sitting on the edge of the vehicle, giving the driver guidance to position the vehicle for recovery, and he went off on the shoulder of the road and we hit a mine.
Was anybody else affected by the mine?
No.
I'm glad to hear it.
It was not like some of the IEDs in the Mideast, where they use large amounts of explosive, like dud bombs, dud artillery shells. These were just 10-pound anti-tank mine designed to blow the tread off of a tracked vehicle and thereby disable it.
And so you were saying it's typically your job to repair that vehicle then when that happens?
Yes.
What's that process like?
Well, if you have a good team, good NCOs, and the necessary parts, you can get the vehicle back on its own power and get it back into assembly area. If you don't, then you've got to get it up on a vehicle or you got to haul it somehow, but you can't leave it out in the middle of the op zone.
Yeah. So was that a isolated event for combat, or is that something that you experience frequently?
Fortunately, it was not experienced frequently. Other combat engaged in small firefights, incursions into the perimeter during the night, and putting out patrols. That's it.
And what was your role in all that typically?
Well, I had to make sure that my sector of the perimeter was secured and that men were dug in. They knew their zones of fire. They knew who was on their right, who was on their left. And supposedly, if we had anybody in front, we knew who was out there. And then engage anybody that came in that couldn't identify themselves.
For those of us who haven't experienced anything like that, I know you're describing it generally, but what is combat like?
Well, you're trained to react, so you don't give it a whole lot of things until there's sort of a lull or something really dramatic happens. Then you have to go take care of that. So if somebody near you gets wounded, one of your men gets hit or something like that, you've got to tend to them before anybody else, or get them out of the area, get them to safety. My experience is you don't sit around and think about it a lot. You have to react.
Did you lose any of your men in combat?
Of my men in combat, no.
Glad to hear it. Did you end up losing anyone else who you knew, whether that be from your time at Virginia Tech or other training or anything for that matter?
Yes.
Would you like to talk about that?
Well, there was one part that was hard. Two other lieutenants who I knew, we exchanged pleasantries and things early one morning, and they were going out on a what they call a civic action a mission where they go into a village and help people out and stuff like that. And I got sick and was at the Company B Med, the fever and all that crap. And late that night, Captain Jackson, the doctor who was the commanding officer of the medical company, came and asked me if I knew Lieutenants McCullough and Garner. And I said, yeah, I saw them this morning. He said, well, did you know them well enough to identify their bodies? And I said, yeah, I just saw them this morning. They're dead. What are you talking about? Anyway, they got ambushed and were killed.
And were you supposed to be with them that day?
No.
Oh, okay.
I just happened to run into them.
Gotcha. Oh, I'm sorry to hear about your loss. How well did you know them?
Not real well. Acquaintances, having a beer together after an op, stuff like that. Sure. That's all right. There's no need to. Sure.
So, Steve, obviously that sounds like a stressful environment. What did you and the other soldiers do to relax or decompress after that type of thing?
Well, enlisted personnel, for the most part, and I guess junior officers, would go into Bien Phu, the village, and hit the bars, hit the brothels, just have a good time. Myself and my buddy who were there, Teddy and Paul, we played cards, go for a run, that type of stuff. We didn't go down to the village much at all.
Yeah. You mentioned Teddy and Paul. Were those who, is that who you typically hung out with?
Yes, in our unit, there was a supply platoon, and that was led by Lieutenant Theodore Pritchard, graduate of the Citadel. And our shop officer was Paul Sharp. He was a first lieutenant. I don't know where Paul went to school.
Why is it that you all didn't like to go into Bien Phu often?
Well, we just weren't. We had plenty of beer at the small officers club that we had. That's what we called it anyway. It was half a tent. So. And just didn't see the need to do it. No need for the exposure. You're always getting briefed on people being ambushed and not ambushed. What's the term I'm looking for? Mugged, if it will, something like that. Yeah. So we got down there.
What was that relationship like between the officers and the enlisted men?
Well, the officer and enlisted men relationship was good. Our company commander didn't like to go anywhere. He would not go out to the field, would not go on an operation, would not come out and see how the unit was doing or anything. He didn't do anything. He was not popular.
Gotcha. So what was, he wasn't popular, but what type of kind of boundaries were there between the officers and the enlisted men? Was that common for the commanding officer to be not very present?
No, not to my knowledge. The others in the support battalion would be out there in the operational area. They may not be there for the whole op, but they come out and visit the troops, see how they were doing, what the needs were. And then they meet with the brigade staff and say, "How are my guys doing? How are they doing? Are they doing their mission? They completing their mission?" So, given the support that you need, uh, Teddy stayed in the Army for a while. Was with the 82nd Airborne at Bragg. Then he got out. Was an entrepreneur of sorts.
So, I'm sorry, proceed.
Well, we attended one or two brigade reunions. Unfortunately, he died around 2010 of pancreatic cancer attributed to Agent Orange exposure.
I'm sorry to hear
That's
about
too
that.
bad. Yeah, it's too bad. Paul, I ran into Paul again in Panama in 79, 80. He's quite a character. And I looked him up again and found out he lived near I-95 in North Carolina. And on the way back from family vacation, we stopped and visited with him and his wife.
That's sweet.
It was
I'm
nice
glad.
to see him again. Yeah, he had quite an interesting career.
Do you have any stories or reflections you wish to share about either Paul or Teddy, but certainly, about your fallen friend?
Let's see. No, I can't think of anything that's noteworthy. The less noteworthy things, the better you're off.
So what is it that you all generally talked about as soldiers?
Reviewing the op, how things went, how the soldiers were performing, and how other officers we knew who were assigned to other units were doing. There were some we entered the Army with who were assigned to units around the Saigon and the Bien Phu area.
And similarly related, those officers that you might be talking about, if they were unpopular, such as the one that you mentioned, what is kind of the risk to that, and how does that affect the group?
Well, it was just something people talked about, and they did their best to avoid them. The commander of our company, some of the soldiers tried to frag him one night, but they didn't know how to set a booby trap well, so he didn't get injured.
What was that like? Did you know about that before it happened?
No, not till after it happened.
Do you remember how it is that they tried to frag him?
Yeah, we had a PSP walkway that went to a shower area that was set up, and they put a trip line because they knew he always went late at night when nobody else was in the shower to shower up. So they set a tripwire.
Was this just because he was unpopular, or had he done something outside of just kind of being ignoring you all?
I don't know the answer to that. I don't know the rationale for trying to frag him.
What was that like? Within the company afterwards, how does that affect? I can imagine that's a fairly tense environment.
I don't know. I left for a field op, so I wasn't around.
Gotcha.
And that lasted about 4 weeks, so it was old news.
Kind of on another note, did you keep a journal or anything else to document your experiences in Vietnam?
I kept a notebook of what I had to do, not a journal per se. Well, it had number of casualties, stock numbers of items we had to get, places had to be, when it had to be there, that type of thing. Names of points of contact at other units who we could swap stuff with. That was how you got along in logistics. You knew people. This guy, Teddy, one time somebody got the stock number for Chaplin's table wine, and they ordered 50 cases of table wine. And it came in. And he was the supply officer, so he said, hey, we got wine. And we were able to trade that with other units for parts or some other things that we might need.
Was there anything that was like exceptionally valuable as a trading tool there?
Yes.
What was that?
2.5 kW generators.
Okay. What were those used for? He got in
generating power in the field. He got in one time, he got in a whole tractor trailer load, 110. They traded for good stuff.
Yeah. What did you use them in the field for, like to generate power? Was that?
In the Tactical Operations Center, you need power for the radios, for any lights and stuff like that.
Gotcha. Yeah. Was radio usage big then?
Yes.
And similarly, I don't know if that plays into this, but what did soldiers do to try and relax or cope, process their experiences?
Drugs.
Yeah. Which drugs?
Mainly marijuana. They smoked a lot of pot. You could smell it in the air. Others used heroin. Cocaine, I don't know if they even had that, but heroin came from the Golden Triangle, China, Burma, Laos area where they grew opium poppies and stuff. So there was a heroin supplier for the world at that time, I think.
Yeah. As an officer, what was did you have any responsibility to monitor or limit or anything like that with the drug use?
Well, we would brief them on the perils of drug use, and if we saw somebody smoking a joint, we'd admonish them and say, okay, this is your first time. If we catch you again, you're going to get Article 15 or summary court or something like that type of punishment, non-judicial punishment.
So what was the general attitude towards marijuana?
You weren't supposed to do it, but mainly enlisted did it. I don't know of any officers that used weed at all. Not around, certainly not around me. I never observed officers doing it.
And what about heroin? What was was there a difference in paradigm between people who smoked heroin and people who smoked weed?
I don't know. Not to my knowledge.
That's interesting that they were both, looked upon similarly. I think in today's age, most people would understand that weed is not quite the same class of drug as heroin. Was there any of that understanding back then?
Well, I think most people thought heroin was really a hard drug.
Okay.
And marijuana was an intro to the drug world and would get you hooked on harder drugs.
So that you mentioned that you would talk to the enlisted men about the dangers of drug use. Do you remember at all any of those conversations, and what, what was the fear and what was the danger that you were expressing to them?
Well, it was a standard presentation that they I'm trying to think who the source was on that. I don't know if we had a PR officer, maybe it was the medical people, but you just read it, and you're not in charge of yourself. If you take in a dose of heroin, you could be out. What can take advantage of you.
Yeah. What was the relationship with alcohol like?
Oh, it was a very cozy relationship.
Was there any understanding that alcohol was in a similar class?
Well, you didn't take a bottle of booze with you to the op area. That's not to say some higher ranking officers didn't do it, but you didn't have room for a bottle of booze in your rucksack, and you wanted water in your canteen. Now, you could put some weed in there without a problem, and they did it. Now, when you got back, you had an officers club, which was a tin shack in our area. Then they had a larger one that was an enlisted man's club, and the drink of choice was beer. There was, let's see, from the States was Olympia, and from the Philippines was San Miguel, which they referred to as Samagu, which is really good lager beer, still is. And then you had, let's see, what else? Oh yeah, the Vietnamese beer, Bai Moi Ba.
How was that?
That's 33 beer. Wasn't as good as San Miguel. Then there was hard liquor too. They played a game called 7-11-21. The person, you agree in the group beforehand how many shots go into the drink. So the person who rolls the 11th die gets to name the drink. The person who rolls the 11th die has to pay for it. The person that rolls the 21st die has 10 seconds to drink it. That's 7-11-21.
Was that a common game?
Yes.
Was that more often a thing in the officers club or in the enlisted men's club?
I can't speak for the enlisted men's club, but we played it from time to time in the officers club.
From your observations, do you think that the drug use, and I include alcohol when I say that, was more heavily among the enlisted men, or was that a problem with the officers as well?
I would say it was heavier among enlisted.
Understood.
That's an opinion, though.
Yeah.
Stephen, do you mind if I jump in with a question at this time? So
no, I don't mind at all. JR.
JR might mind. He doesn't mind. I'm interested in morale. I know that the Army went to great lengths during the war to try to raise morale, which is why sometimes Budweisers would be, provided to men in the field. On the other hand, a lot of people presumed that combat troops were using drugs because of bad morale. What were your thoughts on morale among the enlisted men? What did you witness or experience personally that could speak to the morale of the men in the field?
Well, I think the essential difference is when in the war you're talking about. Early on, there was a certain enthusiasm among the troops. I'm talking 66, 65, maybe 67. maybe until till Tet or something like that. But the commands went out of their way to try and keep morale up. Of course, we had the shows and holidays, Bob Hope, and all of that sort of stuff. And they try and make sure as many of the soldiers were in to attend as possible. I've got some film of us going to the foremost ice cream plant outside of Saigon and then flying ice cream via helicopter into troops in the field. I mean, I got some pictures of us landing in bomb holes to get ice cream and stuff to the troops. I think the overall morale changed radically once the anti-war movement developed and became prominent in the United States.
What about among combat troops? Did you see or witness, troops themselves engaging in anti-war resistance?
No, not while I was there.
In a similar vein, I understand that you left Vietnam and you were back in the States in about 1970 when that anti-war movement was picking up. Is that correct?
I returned to the States in, I think it was July of '67.
Oh, okay.
Things really hadn't picked up by then.
Were you in the United States when things were picking up, when
Yes.
Kent State happened?
Yes.
And you were still, were you at that point in the reserves or were you still active duty?
No, I was active duty. I was an instructor in the U.S. Army Ordnance Center and School at Aberdeen Proving Ground.
What was it like to, just to witness that anti-war movement as a general rule, and then also, did you notice that among any of the men who were in the military with you?
I didn't notice it among the cadre or the faculty. On the other hand, I was teaching, and among other things, the Ordnance Officers Basic course, and this was not students, graduates, commissioned second lieutenants who just come out of college. And there were a lot of disgruntled lieutenants, didn't want to be on active duty, wanted to get off active duty, wanted to get out of the Army. But that was in the early 68, 69, even the 70 time frame. Yep.
How did you handle that poor attitude?
I think it was more of a hard-ass attitude. You knew what you signed up for, and you're in it now, and you got to deal with it. Make the best of a bad situation. Others that came out of, say, the Citadel, Texas A&M, Virginia Tech, Norwich, any military colleges, were ready to go.
Stephen, whenever you were in Vietnam, you talked about how morale changed over time, and you're really there as it starts to change, from a really, an excitement about the war in '65 that a lot of people believe that they were going off to stop communism in Vietnam. I'm curious about your own reflections on that during the war. How were you feeling, and did your own sense of the war and your involvement in it change over time?
My opinion of the war when I was there was that I was doing my country's bidding, and I was supporting them, my country, and fighting communism. So we had been fighting communism, since 1945. Actually, go back to the late 30s, I guess. But the Cold War was going pretty intense when I was in elementary and high school. I don't know. You remember? Are you old enough to remember Duck and Cover?
I was not alive for that, but
Okay.
I know about it as a historian. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So it was sort of programmed into us that we're going to stop communism.
Maybe for JR, you might describe what duck and cover is. He might have a different experience of that.
I am also familiar with it from a historical standpoint, but
yeah. So we were there was a certain amount of indoctrination for the public, and that happened with Vietnam early on. But when a lot of the troops started coming home, I think that got things going. The agitation. A lot of people in college didn't want to serve because you had the draft. And I think most of that started in late 67, 68. Although I couldn't, that's an opinion.
Sure. I mean, it certainly started as early as 67, if not by 65, depending on who you're talking to.
Interesting.
Yeah. The Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee came out against the war in 65. Dr. King spoke out in 67. But, yeah, I mean, Kent State's 1970, and
Right.
By then it's a national movement for sure.
Indeed it is. Was, I should say.
Yes, sir. I'm curious, by 66 and 67, while you're there, were men counting down the days of their tours at that point? Were they, keeping calendars, and how were they feeling at that time?
Well, yes. If you got within 60 days of what's called your DROS, you kept a short time calendar, where you counted the days down. And let's see, what I'm trying to think of one of the expressions they used. I'm so short, if I fell off the sole of a shoe, I'd break my leg. Stuff like that.
Yeah. Did you have, or did the men have superstitions about that?
Interesting question. Not well. When you got short, the powers that be, and I'm saying 30 days, tried not to send you to an op area. You stayed in the cantonment area or something like base camps.
As an officer, was there a shorter combat mission deployment within that 12 months? So by 6 months or 9 months, were you less likely to go into the field?
In my particular case, I always went. The CO didn't want to go. The shop officer couldn't go. And the supply officer was held in the base camp by the commanding officer. He wouldn't let Teddy go. Teddy, I think, took one op in the year he was there.
How long would you be out in the bush for any given mission?
3 to 4 weeks.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just curious, what would it be like coming back from 3 or 4 weeks out in the bush in Vietnam? And then how long would you be in the rear?
Well, the decision on that was made by the brigade commander, his deputy, and the infantry battalion commanders, based on what's the word I'm looking for? Recuperating, as it were, resupplying, working. you have new soldiers coming in. They have to receive a certain amount of training and be integrated correctly into the units, and whatever else had to be taken care of to get ready to go. Because you have to resupply with web gear, ammunition, medical supplies, and then you have to make arrangements to get everybody fed. I'll tell you a cute story. You know what C-rations are? Were? Yeah. Okay,
Sure.
They come in a case, and there's 24 in a case, if I remember correctly. Well, when we went out on an op, we have a convoy, might have been 8 hours, 10 hour, 12-hour drive. So Lieutenant Skolochenko lined his men up that were going, opened up the case of C's, and said, walk by and take a C ration, take 2 of them, and you eat them in the truck or on the road. Well, the guys that come by, and then they're not taking anything. There's only half of them left. Well, what the hell's the matter? Oh, I don't like that. The ham and lima beans. I don't like ham and lima beans. Just take the damn stuff and get out of here. All right. Well, smart guy. Next op we went on, I put the cases out, turned them upside down so you couldn't tell what meal you were looking at. I said, pick one. And just pick them a couple and go. Well, they did that, and then they'd look at it, and they say, oh, shit, chopped ham and eggs and whatever other ones. And, yeah, do that. Okay. So the next op, they go by, and it's all the bottoms, and they're counting 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, this way. Pick this one up. Oh, yeah. Hot dogs and baked beans. That's what I wanted. Well, they memorized the location of the various meals in the C-ration case. Next up, in consultation with my NCOs, we opened the cases, moved everything around, put them out. Troops come by, pick it up. That's supposed to be hot dogs. This is ham and lime and beans. This is in the wrong place, Lieutenant. Come on. What are you going to do? So, just a true story.
Do you remember which of the C rations? Do you have a favorite one?
For me,
yeah, or at least I'd really love to hear about both.
The hot dogs and baked beans were probably the favorite one. Although I don't know if you can probably find a copy somewhere, but there are published C-ration cookbooks. There's more than just a meal. Like, say you have chopped ham and egg. You'd open that up. Do you know what you used to open it with?
Presumably a knife.
No. Can't open a can with a knife easily.
Oh, I wasn't aware it was in a can. I thought that this was like I'm picturing an MRE in my head, to be honest.
No. Those are meals refused by nearly everyone. MRE. They issued a device called a P-38. Have you heard of it?
I actually think I have. We had another interviewer who he brought it out and showed it to us. I understand it was a fairly common thing that everyone had.
Oh, yeah, it came in a case of C's.
Yeah.
There were several of them in there. I don't know if... I've got one handy, but it's upstairs. You wore it on your dog tags. You always had a P-38. So, but you'd open a chopped ham and eggs. It always looks sort of green color. But you also got a tin of cracker with a cheese spread. So if you took the cheese spread, mixed it with the chopped ham and eggs and warmed it. It was like omelet.
Gotcha.
It was pretty good.
Getting crafty out there.
Oh, indeed. Check out, there is a C-ration cookbook.
Yeah, I'd
Tells
be
you about
interested
that
to see everything that you all managed to
I'm
make out of nothing.
sure I don't have a copy, but I'm sure somewhere on the web.
So whenever you're going out on mission, you're describing getting on trucks. I would presume that sometimes you went by helicopter as well.
I did certain things by helicopter, but not my entire platoon.
Could you describe what it would be like to land in presumably a combat zone from a helicopter? What was that like for you?
Well, you before you got on, you would know where you're going, and you know whether it's a hot LZ or secured. Generally, pilots try to land in a secure LZ. That's not to say some Viet Cong or something off in the bushes with a rifle, or a machine gun or whatever, shoot at you. I landed in hot LZs maybe twice. We took some incoming fire, but not, hundreds of people shooting at you.
What kind of mission was it? Was it search and destroy?
No, the missions I were on were on basically resupply, flying in with some repair parts. We had what's called a maintenance float. The radio that the infantry platoons had was a PRC-25, called a Prick 25. And if it went bad, of course it was no good. The batteries were dead. They didn't have batteries. So if we needed to replace those, we wouldn't ask them to bring it in. We'd fly out, deliver the batteries, deliver the working radio, bring the defective one back to maintenance so we could fix it. Then it would go into the maintenance float, and the next time it was needed, we'd do the same thing. Now, we could do that with machine gun, M60 machine guns, M2, the Ma Deuce caliber 50 heavy machine gun, AR-15s, whatever weapon it might be. I got a cool picture. I carried a 45, and we got shot at, and the bullet hit the pistol. I have a picture of it somewhere.
That's harrowing.
Yeah, that was interesting.
Can you talk a little bit about the? You said you received a Purple Heart. Can you tell me about how that happened?
Yeah, a vehicle in front of me ran over a mine, and I caught some shrapnel in arms, and that had to be removed.
What was that like? What was the treatment like in the field and afterwards?
Well, in the field, it was just putting a dressing, compressive dressing. It wasn't a major, didn't break a bone. It was just a flesh wound for all practical purpose.
Gotcha.
Then when you get to the A tent, they probe around in it and use a magnet to get a piece of shrapnel out. They give you a shot, and then stitch it if it needs stitches, and wrap it up. Go on your way.
And do you just return back to the field after that, or is there
Sure.
a time period? Okay.
Yes, yeah.
I want to return back to, we were talking earlier about the anti-war movement. So you said that you were in America during the 70s when this was really picking up and becoming a very big national discussion. Was there at any point during either your time in Vietnam or afterwards that you managed to listen to what they were saying and reevaluated or even just evaluated your service for the first time and gave thought to the anti-war movement?
Well, at a point, I thought, I guess 71 or so, I thought it was time to get out of there. Then I got assigned as a counterinsurgency advisor to the Royal Thai Army up in Udon, northeastern Thailand. So I was out of touch with the real world. We were, just out with a Thai Army unit. We weren't around many U.S. at all.
So was it just not something that you considered very much at that point?
No, I didn't.
Yeah. Since you've retired, have you given more thought to that?
No.
No?
No, I've happily retired, chasing after grandkids.
I'm glad to hear it. What
We've been very fortunate.
Yeah.
With regard to our health, and kids and grandkids all live within driving distance. Keeps you busy.
Yeah. Do you have any thoughts about your service now, or more specifically about the war, that you wish to share?
I think the powers that be, Mr. McNamara, Mr. Nixon, others, did a gross disservice to this country.
And how so?
In my opinion, they were more interested in trying to create a legacy for themselves and how they defeated communism.
When is it that you feel like you came to that realization or conclusion?
That's probably mid-'80s, when a lot of stuff started coming out about how they operated, and you get some insight. And you have Ellsberg releasing the Pentagon Papers and stuff like that.
Do you remember reading the Pentagon Papers when they were released?
No.
No.
I might have, but I don't remember it.
Right. Clearly, you're familiar with the fact that they exist and that they were released.
Yes.
How was that to see that, and what did it take to kind of reconcile your own service upon hearing that? Did that change your feelings?
No. At the time, I still felt that we shouldn't have been there. And the rest of Indochina did not fall. No, Laos got dicey.
Yeah. Were you ever in Laos or Cambodia?
Not when I was in Vietnam.
Understood. Did you go back there a different time?
The 4 provinces that I had as an advisor to the Royal Thai Army bordered both Laos and Cambodia. And there were certain things going on that you made, I wouldn't say as an incursion, but you crossed the border. No.
And what years were you in that region?
72, 73.
Okay. So you were there before the Khmer Rouge was in Cambodia, but did you
Yeah.
have any idea that that was going to be a situation?
No.
Understood. What was that area like just previous to obviously such a detrimental period of time for them?
I'm not sure what you mean. What was the area like?
What was the political status of Cambodia?
I don't know. We didn't spend that much time there.
Gotcha. I understand.
We're just brief visits, as it were.
So, to return some to talking about your service, how did you learn about the current events going on around the world when you were in Vietnam or elsewhere, for that matter?
Well, you had trying to think of the name. You had a radio station in Vietnam. Robin Williams played the guy who did Good Morning Vietnam. Then Stars and Stripes was a military newspaper, but it was sort of one-sided on the Army side, as it was, military side. But it has still had some stories. You could pick up radio stations. You could get Radio Hanoi, and you could pick up some of the English stations would bounce in from the Philippines or from Australia. And I think there was an English language station out of Bangkok also. Maybe
And were you all primarily listening? Oh, I'm sorry, continue.
I said I think there was one out of Saigon also, but I don't remember for sure.
Were you all primarily listening to the news, or did you listen to music as well?
I would say primarily listen to music.
Okay. What type of
Nancy
music was
Sinatra,
common?
These Boots Are Made for Walking. That was the big hit.
Yeah. Was this in the era of more like Clarence Credence or Clarence Credence?
Credence.
I was gonna say you got this. I'm gonna leave this one to Dr. Higgins.
JR, I'm so disappointed in you.
I know. I'm working on it.
No, Creedence late 70s.
Okay. So and you said who did you say was the big star at that point?
Oh, in Vietnam?
Yeah.
In 67, it was 66 Nancy Sinatra and Lee Hazelwood.
Gotcha.
Were you also listening to Jimi Hendrix and the Beatles at that time?
I don't recall Beatles music in Vietnam. And then,
you mentioned Radio Hanoi, which would have been, a propaganda channel. Did American troops listen to that, and did they understand the propaganda behind it, or were they buying into a lot of it, or what was that like?
Well, Hanoi Hannah was the gal that spoke English and gave you the news. 1 battalion of the 1st of the 25th Infantry was wiped out. And that's the kind of news we got.
Similarly, along the lines of music, was there any racial divide, not just between like the music that you listen to, but as a general rule, did you experience any racial discrimination?
I did not experience.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I say experience,
not that I would have, but observed it.
Yeah.
No intentional.
Okay.
And the
What
reason
did you
I say
observe?
that, the reason I say that is because there was the black soldiers would wear what they called a do-rag around their hair, and then put the helmet on over the top of it. A lot of white officers say that's not appropriate, but they never ask why you're wearing a do-rag. The reason is because the roads and everything in Vietnam, if it was not rainy season, were dusty with red dust. And in the convoy, you would be kicking up this red dust, and it would get in the kinky hair of black soldiers. So to prevent their hair from getting full of this crap, they would put on a do-rag. Well, when it finally was understood that it had a useful purpose, they acquiesced and said, yeah, wear the do-rag. People still wear the do-rags.
Outside of that, was there anything else, not even necessarily discrimination, but what was it like, the relationships between black soldiers and white um, soldiers as well? Was there a lot of divide between them?
I can only speak for my unit. They worked well together. A lot of our NCOs were black. Of course, they'd been in the Army for a while. I didn't see discrimination in my unit. Whether it happened in others, I can't say. No, I don't. Nothing comes to mind.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad to hear it. Similarly, you know, not so much discrimination, but did you all interact with any women? Did you all have any morale boosting occasions where there were women who came to the base?
Yes,
Can you tell me about that?
yes.
I'd love to hear it.
I'm messing with you. You ask me a yes/no answer, I'll give you yes/no. But yeah, we had the donut dollies. These are the Red Cross girls who would had serve coffee and donuts out of a trailer type of thing. Then, of course, you had various entertainers. Of course, they would come to a base. They would not necessarily go way out to the field. But those of us who happened to be back at the base at the time could enjoy the entertainment. Yeah. Of course, Bob Hope was famous for it. Yeah.
All right. Did you get any R&R?
Yes,
Where'd you
I
go
did.
for R&R?
I had two. One was Hong Kong, and the other was Bangkok.
How were those?
Fun.
Yeah.
I mean, you're a young 22, 23-year-old male. And there were a lot of attractive young ladies who wanted to make you happy.
Was that a common experience on R&R? And what did the guys who had wives at home do?
JR, you're
Well,
not
I
supposed
can't.
to ask about that, man.
Wasn't asking
I
about him
didn't.
personally.
I did. Well, I was not married. I I have no knowledge of what some married guys might have been doing, because you just went to the bars, and what you might have come home with, or might have gone somewhere. Who knows?
I ask because I was curious whether or not any of the men who were in relationships, if it was more common for them to go visit somewhere else for R&R, like Hawaii,
Yes.
as opposed to going to Thailand.
Yes. Yes.
Gotcha.
Some would go to the Philippines, Hawaii, and I think Sydney, Australia, where their spouses could fly to.
Was there any consideration for you having gone to any of those other places, or were you? Did you choose Hong Kong and Thailand?
Yes.
Yeah. Neat.
Because the guys that came back said it was great.
Yeah.
Okay. That's
So-
my intel.
I won't pry further. So I do want to kind of wrap up some of the stories about your service in Vietnam. But before
me
I
tell
do,
you-
is there? Yeah.
Let me tell you a quick story about Hong Kong.
Absolutely.
There were 3 or 4 of us lieutenants from the brigade, and I can't remember the guy's name. He was an artillery officer from somewhere out in the West. He'd been a farmer or something. Okay. Anyway, we got to the President Hotel in Hong Kong, and they didn't have separate rooms. So they said, we'll put you up in the presidential suite. Okay. So we got in there, and the bathroom, in addition to having a big tub, big shower, commode, had a bidet. I can't remember the guy's name, but he said, man, he says, what's that thing next to the toilet? That's a bidet. What's that for? That's for brushing your teeth. So we're getting ready to hit the sack, and he's down on his hands and knees brushing his teeth in the bidet. And another officer comes in and says, what the hell are you doing? You know what that is? Yeah, he told us it's for brushing teeth. Oh, no shit. Anyway.
That's pretty
True
funny.
story. True story. Yeah. Can't remember his name.
Do you have any other good stories or memories that you wish to share before I kind of move on past your time in Vietnam?
We got a request in when I was down in an operation. That was the name of it. Let me see. Might have been Yorktown or Hollandia. Yeah. Down in a place called Vung Tau. And we got a request in from a unit, a signal unit, saying they wanted a TA-3033. We had no idea what a TA-33 was. And we're trying to satisfy this requirement. So we sent one of the NCOs to the unit and flew him out there and said, find out what the hell it was you guys need. TA-33. This is a TA-33. A knife. And on the other side, let's see if I can get it open. I don't know if my fingernails are strong enough. A screwdriver.
That was all?
That was it. Their linemen needed it to hook up telecommunication, hardwire lines. Yeah. Here's something else paratroopers got. I don't think they issue them anymore. spring-loaded, a jump knife.
Gotcha. I can see that just barely here. It looks like it's got an interesting curve to it, though. What is that for?
Cutting your shroud lines if you get tangled up in a jump.
Gotcha.
So you don't have to open it with both hands. You can just use the spring-loaded, like a, what do they call it?
Switchblade?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Switchblade.
Interesting.
Can't believe that mother's 60 years old almost.
Are those all old relics from Vietnam, or did you get either of
No,
those
they're from Vietnam.
after?
They're from Vietnam.
Yeah. Do you have anything else that you brought back?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, downstairs, I've got a crossbow that a villager gave me and the tip of a harpoon.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
In kind of in that vein, what was your experience like with the civilians of Vietnam?
Well, we had what we called hooch maids and houseboys, and they would take care of the trash, garbage, and that type of stuff around in the base camp area.
Was it one of them who gave you the crossbow?
I don't remember.
Gotcha.
It's in a,
Did
still
you
in the
interact?
box.
Did you interact much with any of the civilians outside of those who were working in the base?
Not really. I did not.
Was that discouraged, or what was the attitude towards that type of thing?
Well, if you were in the field and you were operating near a village, they would come and want to sell you things, rice and stuff. I don't remember whether it was encouraged or discouraged. I think it was tolerated, for lack of a better term.
Yeah. So, Steve, I'm going to move ahead some here. I want to talk to you about whenever you were leaving Vietnam.
Yeah.
Do you remember, do you remember the day that you left, and what was that like?
Well, I flew out of Benoit Air Base, and as soon as the plane left the ground, everybody started cheering and clapping.
Where'd you guys fly to?
We flew nonstop San Francisco.
Do you remember getting off the plane?
Yes, yeah. Got off the plane. They had arrangements made to fly to Dulles, I think, at that time.
What was your reception like getting there?
There were, I was wearing a uniform called khakis at the time. And I got spit upon. And there were some demonstrators. That was it. I was in a hurry.
How did that make you feel? Was that...
Well, I had to decide whether I wanted to jump down this guy's throat or just get on with things. And I thought the better of attacking him. I remember that. Yeah.
Was that attitude common at home?
Not around Aberdeen. That was a military town.
I understand that San Francisco had some of the worst of the anti-military sentiment during that time.
Probably so, but I never got out of the airport.
Yeah.
Just one plane to the other.
Where did you return after that?
To Washington, D.C., to my home, with my parents, and my brother, and then up to Aberdeen Proving Green,
Gotcha.
which was an hour and a half, 2-hour drive up 95.
And I know that you were still in the service, but what was it like to try and readjust to not being deployed in the field?
Well, we were in the basic quarters with other officers, and most of whom had been to Vietnam. So it wasn't a big adjustment. Getting ready to teach, teaching you to teach, reviewing the subject matter, etc.
Yeah. Did you interact much with civilians during that time?
Yes. Yeah, there were a lot of civilian instructors. A lot were retired Air Force, Army, military.
And I hate to, sorry to skip around a little bit, but where during this time period did you meet your wife?
That was, I think, August of 69. Yeah.
So not long after coming back.
No, I got back in June of 67, so it was about 2 years. Yeah.
Do you remember where you met her?
Oh, yes.
How did that go?
I was a patient at Walter Reed. I had a training accident, and a buddy of mine at Walter Reed who just got a new hook, and we said, well, let's go down this nightclub and see if we can meet anybody, particularly females. And we got to a place called the Gentleman 2. We got there early in the evening and were seated at a table for 4. Place filled up. Waiter came over and said, you mind if this couple joins you? And it was a guy and a really smoking hot woman. And that's how I met my wife.
Was she on a date with that guy when you met her?
Yep.
It's impressive.
Yeah, well, I offered to take them home so I knew where they lived. But he was on to me.
How long?
On her.
How long?
But I did find her name
Yeah.
and where she went to school. And when I got back up to Aberdeen, I wrote her a letter and said, this is who I am. She's got everything to lose and nothing to gain going out. And she consulted with her brother and her sister, who she was living with, and said, well, he's an officer, so give it a try. Have him come up, we'll meet him. So I did, and that was that. First time I ever went steady or was never pinned or anything.
When did you all get married?
January 19th, 1971.
And did you all start dating shortly after meeting?
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yep, that was it.
That's sweet. How do you feel that your service has affected your relationship, if at all?
I think it made it stronger. Yeah.
Did you ever get the opportunity to talk about your experiences in Vietnam with your wife?
as they say, de vez en cuando, from time to time, not in detail.
Yeah. Did you get the opportunity to talk about your service with anyone, for that matter?
My brother.
And if I recall correctly, you
My
said
aunt.
that he was a veteran as well?
Yes.
Yeah.
Not a Vietnam vet. He served in Germany.
Gotcha.
And San Francisco. Mm-hmm.
And you said your aunt as well. Was she related to the service at all?
Yeah, she's retired as a first sergeant or a sergeant major in 65, June or July of 65. Yeah. Because I and one of my college buddies went down to her retirement ceremony at Fort McClellan in Anniston, Alabama, the home of the WAC.
Huh.
Yeah.
Nice, I'm glad. Did you connect with any other veterans individually when you got home, or any other veterans groups for that matter as well?
No VFW, no American Legion. I did work and still donate and support Association of the 173rd Airborne, which is active and provides scholarships and other things like that.
Why not the American Legion or VFW, if you don't mind my asking?
No, I don't mind you asking. I just never got around to it.
What about the Vietnam Veterans of America?
I donate to that. I donate to the wall. I donate to a lot of things, but they got to have a good score on Charity Navigator. And there's a bunch of groups that solicit money from you, but they're like scams, I think. My wife started keeping a track of all the donation requests that we get in the mail last December. She's up to over 200 different organizations so far.
Wow.
She writes them down.
How long did it take for you to feel comfortable talking about your time in the service?
I don't know. I think it was too gradual to put a specific date on it.
Mm-hmm.
When I got back from Vietnam, a lady friend of my mother who lived in Washington fixed me up with the daughter of her neighbor. And we were on a date in D.C. and we're walking down, I think, 14th Street. And car backfired and I hit the deck. She said, "You're home." Okay. I remember that. Yeah.
Did you have any other experiences with PTSD or reactions from your time in the service?
Most recently, I got really choked up watching the Republican convention when they started interviewing families of the 13 killed in our extraction from Afghanistan. And one of the women was describing coming to the door and seeing an officer and a chaplain. And that was probably the hardest duty that I have ever had. And I would not want it. If it had to be done, I would do it. But it's really tough.
Yeah.
That choked me up.
Yeah, I mean, understandably, I can't imagine that that is an easy task. Do you recall when it was that you had to go through that?
Well, from time to time, while I was still on active duty.
Was this typically to inform the family of someone who you were close with or knew in some capacity?
No.
Okay.
No.
Do you happen to remember their names?
No. I remember the name of some of the soldiers who were, when the soldiers died or killed overseas, they're what's called a summary. I don't know if this is true now. A summary court officer, you're reported, and you take charge of that individual's belongings, you inventory them, and you write the survivor, next of kin, with condolence and other things. While I was in Vietnam, I did that, and I got one case. The family wrote back to me and asked for this soldier's jump boots, paratrooper jump boots. I went to his commanding officer, an infantry company, and said, I'm the, what do you call it, summary court officer for this guy, and this request, let's work and get these people jump boots.
And did you manage to get him?
Oh, yes.
Glad to hear it.
Even if the CO had to take them off another soldier and put this guy's name in them, polish them up and send them. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Have you gotten the opportunity to see the Vietnam Memorial, the wall?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
When did you go see that?
Oh, geez. The last time was probably earlier, mid-90s.
What was that experience like?
It was moving. I saw the names of people I know.
Yeah.
That are on there.
Anyone in particular that you'd like to mention?
Lieutenant Gardner, Lieutenant McCullough, Colonel Van Dusen, Richard Hydo, there's another soldier, his name escapes me at the minute. Tomas Montecero from Texas. I forget his last name. I'm sorry.
No worries. And we can work on maybe finding that later as well.
I can find it. I have it written somewhere.
I know you mentioned the extraction from Afghanistan before. what was it like for you to see that, and how did that relate to your own experience having watched the fall of Saigon?
Interesting question. I've never compared the two. I think that the fall of Saigon was thought out a little more in advance than our departure from Afghanistan. I've not studied it.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember where you were when you learned about the fall of Saigon?
Yeah, I was in the Pentagon.
What was going through your head when you heard about that?
Well, we knew we were getting out of there, so it wasn't a surprise. It finally happened. Not as orderly as one might have liked it, but the North Vietnamese were not cooperating.
Yeah. Was there any part of you that was upset to have served in a war that ultimately we didn't win?
No, I think I was resigned to it.
Had that been a long time coming? Had that been something you'd grappled with already?
Yes. Yeah, there were discussions about the war among soldiers and people you work with. Most of the officers I work with had done a tour in Vietnam. So mostly all the same opinion. Came around to thinking shouldn't have been there in the first place. Or Truman should have given the French the nukes that they asked for back in, 53, 54? Dien Bien Phu.
No, I just finished relating your service to the situation in Afghanistan, but is there anything from your experience that you would like to share with veterans from Afghanistan who might be dealing with similar feelings? Any insights there?
Basically, they're all volunteers, so you have to deal with it. And if you feel like you need help, talk to somebody. The VA is there. You can go to a hospital and tell somebody in the emergency room that you're having issues. And my experience, from what I've seen and heard, is that people will respond to you. The young man who was my driver and RTO in Vietnam, I'm still in touch with him and his wife. They live outside of Pittsburgh, but he's suffering dementia, and he's in assisted living, and the VA is taking wonderful care of him. They have no complaints. I've heard good things about the VA in this area, and the help is there. You have to want to seek it. You have to want to help yourself. One of the charities that both my wife and I contribute to is Tunnels to Towers. They got a better than 95 on Charity Navigator.
And what do they do?
They provide homes, pay mortgages off for those killed in action, or don't have to be killed in action, just service members killed, or first responders killed or injured, and they give them custom homes. They're also now in the process of creating living spaces for homeless vets by buying hotels and refurbishing them. Yeah, check it out, Tunnels to Towers.
Yeah, I'd love to. It sounds like a very worthy cause.
The guy that started it takes no money, no salary, and he started it because his brother was a first responder on 9/11 and was killed in New York.
It's very noble. Steve, I only have a handful more questions for you, but what would you want future generations to understand about war and the Vietnam War specifically as well?
Well, the Vietnam War was politically motivated, given the time that we were in. That's the Cold War and the international fight against communism. That it was, might say, a worthy endeavor to begin with. Didn't stay that way. But you have to understand that there are leaders who want their way. And I guess as long as they don't have to pay the price, they're willing to try and get it. I don't know what else to say. Mr. Putin wants Ukraine. What's the old song? Russia without the Ukraine is a country. Russia with the Ukraine is an empire. It's the fertilest part. They grow everything there. Supplied all of Soviet Russia. Stalin, nationalized all the farms. Of course, he was a beast anyway.
Yeah. Steve, is there any message specifically that you want to be giving during this interview for your posterity and for your kids and for your grandkids?
Well, they've actually asked me that stuff, and when we did it, I thought we were doing the right thing. Question authority. Don't take things on faith. Question and test.
Absolutely.
That's what I tell them.
I like that philosophy a whole lot. Steve, is there anything else that we haven't discussed that you'd like to get to? Or is there anything that you wanted to come back to?
Give me a second to think.
Absolutely.
Well, I believe that service in the military or police or other first responders gives an individual an idea of the frailty of people and maybe a better understanding of what motivates people. And you get to know people and learn about their aspirations and their faults, and you learn more about your own.
Any notable examples of that? What did you think that you learned about yourself from your service?
Oh. That I am not a good politician. One of my officers' efficiency reports, a colonel wrote, "If you want to know how things really are, ask Major Skolochenko." I never sugarcoated stuff. Always tell it the way it is.
Certainly an admirable quality.
Well, I don't know.
I would say so, personally.
Yes, but how many people who tell the truth wind up in any significant politically oriented position?
You can be a good person or a good politician, I suppose.
You might piss off a lot of people along the way, Stephen, but I admire that.
I've got a grandson. He's 12 now, and he was elected the best male in his class coming out of 5th grade, going into middle school. And Brody is empathetic. Teachers would have him counsel other troubled kids in his class. Hold on. And he just has a way about him. And all of his uncles, aunts say Brody's going to be a politician, a Schlockmeister Oyer, or a used car salesman. But he's now selling candy in school and making hundreds.
Say whatever's the hustle.
And he got his license as a commercial crabber in the Chesapeake Bay at 11 years old.
What an interesting kid.
And sells crabs by the dozen in his neighborhood, which is on the Chesapeake Bay.
Yeah. Has
Cool
to be
kid.
Inspiring to watch your posterity,
He is.
do well.
He's a good guy. Yeah.
So, Steve, I just want to ask you one last question, and that is simply, how would you like to be remembered?
Like to be remembered. I think would like to be remembered as a good father, good grandfather, and an honest man.
Those are solid things to be remembered by, if I can say so myself.
Yeah.
Steve, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. I really enjoyed listening, and I really appreciate you being open about your experiences.
Okay.
That is all I've got for you. If you don't mind staying on for a second when we end this recording so that everything uploads, I'd appreciate it. But do you have any last questions for me?
No, sir.
Awesome. Well, then thank you so much.
Yeah, and I just want to say thank you for sharing such a powerful story.
Let me ask you a question. What kind of response have you gotten from other Hokie vets?
So you are my 8th interview so far, and I think that we have only 4 more people to potentially be candidates at the moment, but we are also working and open to interviewing other people.
Well, I hope you get additional respondees.
Yeah, I do as well. I very much appreciate and enjoy hearing your all stories.
Thank you. I'll stand by for what's next.